No matter what stage of life you're in, there's always going to be something for you to learn. And that can be anything in the world. Walking, enunciating words properly, doing basic math and algebra, critical thinking, learning how to drive, learning how to budget, learning how to do your laundry. The things that we can learn in this world are basically limitless. Some people may see that as a world full of excitement and wonder. Others, like myself, take that to mean that we don't know enough of what that something is in order to perform duties at work, pass a class in college, or just in general, live life to the fullest. This is generally known as, or what I think it's known as, being out of depth. Typically what that means is a situation is too difficult for that person to deal with. Based on that definition, it sounds like that person would almost always give up in that situation. Now, let's look at this from a different angle. With every academic year, whether you're in your middle school, high school, college, or grad school, of course almost everything is going to be new to you, right? And yet you wouldn't exactly consider yourself being out of depth in that position because, well, those are things you can learn in a relatively short amount of time. But, and this can extend beyond school. When you add layers of complexity and nuances to a subject, whatever it is, chances are that maybe you'll pick it up relatively easy or you might struggle with new concepts. If there comes a point where a concept or an idea is explained in full and you still don't understand, you're out of depth when it comes to that concept or idea. And you may have to refer to previous concepts or ideas to be able to understand the first one that's been presented to you. Of course, it's not the end of the world if that happens. You just have to go back a few steps and do or learn something. Sometimes even that is hard to do. Whether you try to dissect that concept or idea into pieces and try to understand each and every single one of those pieces, or just stepping back and trying to look at the bigger picture, you might still not get it. Well, that's been the story of my life for the past 18 months or so, back when I started grad school anyways. It's been an ongoing experience in my professional career in the workforce. If I'm being honest, there are so many more things that it's hard for me to understand in my personal life than in my professional life, but here I am focusing on professional stuff. If you follow my life story, you know that I completed some internship terms within the last 2 years of my college career. As far as I'm concerned, and I think this might be the general belief, internships are the stepping stones to a full-time job, in the sense that you gain experience that future potential employers might see valuable. This is not to say that internships are required to get a full-time job. I have friends who have gotten full-time jobs without an internship at all. That's kind of beside the point. The big question for me when I was going into my internship was, has college prepared me to take on a full-time job? The short answer is yes. Can you use Microsoft Word, Excel, and PowerPoint? Well, you already have the hard skills necessary to be employed anywhere, almost. Because then you'll be able to prove that you can keep up with simple tasks. The harder part comes in when you're given more information about the more complex projects that are going on in your workplace. Now the question becomes, what can you do with this information? Do you go to more experienced personnel to get some clarifying explanations? Do you learn how to use work-related software to tackle the project? Or do you simply go in blind and hope for the best? As you gain experience in a workforce, oftentimes answers aren't so black and white, and in many cases, they probably shouldn't be. One of my assignments during internship was to evaluate the chemicals that we use and make sure that the labels on those chemicals were up to date according to safety standards. In my internship workplace, there were a lot of chemicals. So my options were to go to senior operators to see if they have an updated list of certain chemicals, use certain software to go through data of labels of chemicals that we already have, or just go around the workplace and physically inspect every single chemical container. At this point, you might now ask, how does being out of depth factor into play here? In this instance, I was out of depth because I didn't know what option to go with. What I did was assess how much time it would take to get this task complete, and for some reason, feel overwhelmed by the amount of labels that I had to find. Yeah, weird reasons, but that's how I acted. Once I was done feeling overwhelmed, I went ahead and started looking for container labels. It did take a while because I was writing down the same names of the same chemicals over and over again. Eventually an operator came around and asked what assignment I was working on. I told him, he went into his office, he came back, and he handed me an updated data sheet. All the labels of the chemicals I had listed, they were already on that data sheet. So all I could think about was how inefficient I was in getting that task done. Had I not felt so out of depth, I would immediately gone to an operator and see what data sheets they already have. That assignment was done, but it had to be done on a monthly basis. Well, since I now have the experience to know what to do when that assignment comes around again, it wouldn't be so much an issue as it was the first time. Basically, the repetitiveness of this task was the only layer of complexity, but it was nothing too hard to solve. It's funny, because back then I thought it'd be the worst I'm so lost feeling I had in my life. Oh no, Brandon. Wait until you get into grad school. Let me tell you, grad school last year made me wish I was still working internships last year. So software like MATLAB and Python, I was familiar with them. But the projects, the assignments that require the use of said software, light years above my comprehension levels. Problems so complex that even the TAs for the professors were not able to help much. They were just as lost as we are when they first took the courses. So how was I out of depth there? No, let me rephrase that. How were we out of depth there? It's simple. We don't know what to do. The textbook gives us very limited hints. Of course, we resorted to using past homework assignments to complete our current homework assignments. We don't have to talk about that. No matter how long I stared at a textbook hoping to learn something, I couldn't. Makes me wonder to this day how the hell I completed grad school in the first place. So, internship, grad school, and now my current position. I've always believed that I can hold out a job for any amount of time. I mean, I just went through 5 years of university. I should be able to handle myself, right? Despite having multiple projects under my belt, I am always learning and will continue to learn. Do I still get the out-of-depth feeling to this day? Every now and then, yeah. But with the experience I have now, I think that's sort of expected, especially when you're starting a new job in a new place. Of course, you're not going to understand everything that's happening on your first day on a job. Well, if you somehow manage to do that, you should be compensated handsomely. I didn't completely understand the role that I had accepted on the first day on a job. It seemed that my coworkers and my bosses understood that, because besides training and orientation, they've kinda held my hand on the first few projects that I've taken on. I felt that way at that time because there were probably some things back then that I probably should understand regardless of whether I have experience. Any jargons that they had brought up during meetings, they were explained to me in full. Any new projects that would like for me to work on, they would explain the situation to me in full. So overall, in my current position, I don't really feel lost. But I guess there will come a time and point in the future that I would need to be able to create projects for others. And I wouldn't really know how to do that because I'm still a much a newbie as I was around 6 months ago. Maybe I would be able to do that intuitively when I gain more experience, who knows. So I guess that sums up the part of my life going from academics to professional work. So what's out of depth for me in my personal life? I've always thought that fashion was one such issue. In my younger years, I had zero fashion sense. I didn't know how to comb my hair, I didn't know what cologne was, I just didn't know how to make myself not look disheveled. If there's one thing that college has automatically corrected for me, it definitely was fashion. I now have an appropriate attire for anything. Fashion is nothing when it comes to being out of depth, because the biggest struggle I have now is being in the moment, being present. In college, I thought a great deal about what I wanted to do after graduation. In grad school, I thought a great deal about what I wanted to do after graduation. Well, I'm now in a professional career, what else is there to think about in the future? It ain't gonna be retirement, that's for damn sure. Planning for the weekend? Well, it's fun for the first few weeks that you move into a city, but then after that, well, once you've experienced all that neighboring cities have to offer, you can't help but feel that there's something to do anymore. Every time I go for an experience in a given city, I think, what's the next thing I can get? What's the next thing I can see? Rinse and repeat until all options have been exhausted. Now what? The problem shouldn't be what else is there to do, it's just simply, how do you stay in the present more often when you're going through an experience? I just plan for the future too much. I focus on the future too much. I can't help it. I have to plan, always, for some reason. Perhaps when you don't go in with a plan, it might be more fun than you think. But for some reason, I just need to have a plan. And that's where I'm out of depth, because I struggle to stay in the present. I don't mean to sound like this is a debilitating condition, it's just that I could really enjoy life if I focus on the present more often. This is something that I continue learning about in the same way that everyone else has something to learn about. At some point in the future, we can eventually be confident enough to say that we can be our own teachers. The best teachers, at least in my opinion, are the ones that know that there's always something for you to learn in life. And the best way to learn from life is to live life. That sounds a little cliche, but there's a saying of live and learn, so there's that. Now, I will go ahead and heed that advice.